Welcome back to the program. This is Bottomline Africa, right on KTN News. A reminder of our Twitter poll tonight, and we did ask you earlier, should the Kenyan presidential election be postponed? Should the Kenyan presidential election be postponed? You know the drill. Our Twitter handle is at KTN News. You can as well tweet me at Yusuf Ibra. The hashtag is Bottomline Africa. And this question is informed by the fact that an IEBC commissioner, Dr. Rosalyn Akombe, actually she ceases now to be a commissioner, this after she resigned. And after that, we also had a statement from the IEBC chair, Wafula Chebukati, a statement that many people have, described it as a statement full of disturbing and shocking revelations. So we'd like to hear your feedback on this topic of discussions that we're going to have tonight together with our guests in studio. I'm going to introduce them shortly. We have Mr. Felix Odhiambo, who is an election expert. He's with me in the studio. We also have Mr. Javas Bigambo, a governance expert. We also have Ambassador Jack Tumwa, former ECK commissioner. It's now defunct. And joining us all the way from Kakamega is Peter Alingo, who is a researcher at Institute for Security Studies. Of course, he also has experience when it comes to election matters. Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Felix, let me start with you and allow me to get a quote here from Wafula Chebukati, the chair of IEBC. It's a quote that has gone viral, and this is what he said. I cannot guarantee credible elections at the moment. However, this is possible if there is a dialogue between political parties for an agreement, and also if commissioners work in harmony. From the revelation today from Rosalyn Akombe, as well as the chair himself, the last bit doesn't seem to make sense because the commissioners are clearly divided. We're not seeing any sort of dialogue between these political parties. So the only thing that stands in this statement is that he cannot guarantee credible election. Felix, we're seeing a very different kind of tone here from IEBC.
Yes, of course, I see it, and it's very, very disturbing. And let me say for the record that some of us, and especially me, have consistently spoken about the state of preparedness of the IEBC. But let me state right from the outset that we are faced primarily as a country with a political issue. It's as old as our history and is as clear as our constitution. The heart of the matter is Kenya or are the prevailing political and electoral environment capable of guaranteeing free, fair, and credible elections? And the related question to that is the IEBC as presently constituted capable of holding an election in strict conformity with the Constitution and election laws, as was directed by the Supreme Court? And I'm sorry to say that the answer to those two questions is a definite no. And I've said it, the revelation and the resignation by Commissioner Akombe, and by the way, I must say that was a very heroic and a very bold and courageous move on our part. And the statement by the chair of the IEBC, who is also the returning officer of the presidential election, portrays a very disturbing trend, confirms the fact that IEBC is not ready to procure credible elections, and most disturbingly, that this commission and the secretariat is the most partisan and incompetent secretariat in the history of electoral commission in this country. And I'm saying it as somebody who has worked with a number of commissions, from Kivitu all the way to the commission now.
And Javas, this is where I want to bring you in from the chair's position, from what he said today, that he cannot guarantee a credible election. What do you make out of it?
Well, you see, when the national returning officer speaks firmly and unequivocally that he cannot guarantee a credible election, then one wonders what is it that he can return if that election is conducted. And just on that ground alone, it is important for us to come to one clear point, that this commission is not just prepared to birth a moment of renewal in this country through the 2017 election. And going by the revelations of the chair himself, further going by the revelations of the former IEBC commissioner, Dr. Akombe, it is clear that, one, the commission is lacking leadership from the person of the chair. Two, that other commissioners, this moment, are serving partisan, smaller interests, as opposed to serving the greater good, the general interests of the nation. The other thing is that it is unfortunate that it is politicians in this country who are holding this entire nation at ransom by pulling the strings from behind the curtains on how the commissioners should be working. And in fact, it flies in the face of the very name of that commission being independent. If at all commissioners are not independent to serve these people by way of the oath of office that they took, then it beats logic for them to continue being paid by the taxpayer, for them to continue peddling false hope on this, to this country and my fellow citizens, that they are prepared to conduct this election.
Yes, allow me to engage Ambassador Jack Tumwa. He's a man, of course, who served in the ECK. Of course, that was before IEBC came into the picture. Now, Ambassador Jack, from that statement made by the IEBC chair, we only have 7 days before that presidential raid, and I'm going to engage Felix shortly if that election is going to take place in the first place. So we only have 7 days. So does it mean that IEBC is not ready?
Thank you. I think what the chairman has said is a confirmation of what has been in the public eye for quite some time. The resignation of one of the commissioners also, it may come as a surprise to some people. But to many of us who have been watching what has been happening at the IEBC, we were not surprised that she took the steps that she took today. Now, we really have to look at the entire IEBC vis-a-vis the global and the political environment. IEBC is suffering because of our political environment. If the political environment is not conducive, it has not been conducive for a long time, and every other time IEBC is, the electoral bodies are the ones which are put on the firing line. Now, Chepkati tells us that he may be able to conduct elections next week if ABCD is done. We know very well that the question of dialogue has been discussed by Kenyans for a long time. And none other than the president himself is coming up to say he's not willing to sit up with Raila. To me, that is extremely unfortunate for the country. We have said the two leaders have to forego their chest thumping and look at the suffering of the Kenyans. Yusuf, I'm left to wonder, when you see the actions of our political leaders, when you see the pronouncement of our political leaders, you are left to wonder whether we all live in this country we call Kenya or whether some of them live elsewhere. In fact, it gives me some, if I can go back to my history, remember in 1789 when that Queen Antoinette of France was up in her ivory towers. She saw people demonstrating, and she went ahead to ask them what are they demonstrating for. She was told they didn't have bread, and she said, why can't they have cakes instead of having bread? Now, our political class, while focusing on what they want for themselves, not for Kenyans, they want to push us through an elections come next week. My worry is not even the elections that is going to be on 26. My worry is what happens after 26. What is going to be like between 26 and 2022 when we are going to have another elections. Dialogue is the room.
Ambassador Jack, you've been part of ECK. From the revelations here from Mr. Combes that, there's some commissioners who are openly partisan. Is this normal, first of all, for these commissioners to take sides? And, you've talked about interference from political parties. It seems these commissioners themselves are reading from the same script with these political parties.
It is no secret that our commissioners have taken sides. Very, very unfortunate state of affairs. And because they have taken sides, they don't owe their loyalty to the commission. They don't recognize the fact that they are an independent institution which is supposed to rely on the Constitution of Kenya and other laws that govern it. Once you give yourself up to forces other than the institutions. Of course, I appreciate that the Constitution requires that there have to be consultation between the commissioners and other interested parties. But consultation does not necessarily mean that you take what you have gotten from outside. The final decision is for the commission. The commission has to assess what it picks from outside and come to make a final decision, and it remains a decision of the commission.
Allow me to cross over to Mr. Alingo in Kakamega. And one of the accusations, or one of the things that came out in Akombe's statement, she said that, of course, she accused IEBC of becoming party to the current political crisis in the country. Part of her memo clearly indicated that one of the commissioners even threatened to go physical on her. Now, moving forward, do you think Kenyans are going to trust these commissioners as they are currently constituted?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it is getting to a level of tragedy for us as Kenyans. And this is not good for the civility of our nation and the stability of our nation moving forward. And it therefore is a matter that we need to take extremely seriously. As Kenyans, we must remember three things here. That when Mr. Chebukati speaks on three fronts. One, he speaks as the chair of the institution. Two, he speaks as the institution itself. And three, he speaks as the returning officer for the presidential elections that we are expecting to happen sometimes in the coming couple of days or so. So we have to really, really take Chebukati seriously and interrogate seriously the sentiments that he has expressed. And for me, I can tell you that, look, it was just a matter of time. I think as soon as the Supreme Court dealt a blow to the elections that they did preside over on 8th of August and made those scathing findings, then it was very clear that it was just a matter of time to begin to see the house tumbling down. And that is exactly what we are seeing.
Yes. Now, Alingo, allow me to engage Felix once more. And Felix, clearly, the country is facing both legal and political challenges. To be specific, IEBC. So moving forward, there are those who come from the school of thought saying that, IEBC has powers to postpone this election. But there are those who are saying, of course, it's in the Constitution that the rerun should take place within the 60 days. So what options are there?
I think we will have to look at our political evolution and experience. In 2012, a question arose that the country was forced to deal with on when exactly the date for the new constitution or the first constitution after the promulgation of the constitution in 2010 was supposed to be. In the previous constitution, the president was had the powers to dissolve parliament, and that triggered the chain of events that led to the election day. However, when we promulgated the new constitution, we took that power from the president. So the question that was the country was faced with was when exactly was the 2010 or the 2012 election, supposed to be held. Judge Lenaola was the High Court judge as he was then. Dealt with this issue and gave two scenarios that effectively fixed a new date. Now, going by that president, there is nothing that stops the chairman of the Independent Electoral Commission to move to the Supreme Court to seek an interpretation.
So he has to go to the courts first?
He has to go to the court.
And Jarvis, from a statement here, there's a statement here from the president who is saying that we are ready for the elections set for October 26th. They're very much categorical, and he's saying, I will not hold talks with anyone. And latest report from the IEBC indicate that the chairman has already invited all presidential candidates to an urgent meeting. Are you seeing some sort of a hard stance here?
What is baffling is that our leaders in this country are speaking from both sides of their mouths. One, that it is clear to all of us and every observer that IEBC has spoken clearly that they're not ready for the election or they cannot deliver a credible election. Former Commissioner Akombe has spoken to the same. The president has made an assurance that it's proper, it is necessary, and that the election is possible on October the 26th. And what is worrying is that the level of confidence in matters election preparedness are continually declining. The kind of nosediving we are witnessing in terms of public confidence in the ability of the IEBC to be prepared and even to oversee this election to the level or the threshold that the Supreme Court spoke to about being above board on matters constitutionality and legality, then I think it is worrying for us a week to the election day that we are still gambling with the manner in which this election is going to be conducted. And look at it this way. If you're to stretch your eyes across this continent and see the practice of electoral democracies, whether it's in Cote d'Ivoire, whether it's in Congo, whether it is in Liberia, you realize that the moment an election is credible, it boosts national confidence, it boosts, in fact, even patriotism itself, and in fact, it raises even the manner in which the rule of law is respected in such a country.
Yes.
In this country, as we are speaking this moment, even though we are seeing late-night efforts by stakeholders, or 11th hour efforts by stakeholders, to see how to salvage the efforts and the capacity of the IEBC to conduct this election, I think we must come to a near speedy conclusion that maybe we are just too hopeful and we are wishing for too much, asking for too much from the IEBC. It may be necessary, moving forward, for us to consider a couple of options. And I'll ask these questions in the manner of options that are possible.
Yes.
One, is it possible then for the IEBC to consider shifting the date of this election to a date later within the 60-day period? That is one. Secondly, is it possible for us to find a way of an IPPG sort of kind of approach where we get to have various representatives, especially from the warring sides here? I'm talking about Jubilee, I'm talking about NASA, and of course the third one representing even the other candidates of the presidential ticket. And see also the possibility of seeing what can happen if at all this 60-day period will lapse before we go to an election. I worry and I shudder at the prospect of us pushing on and heading to an election which in the end may lead us to the brink of a precipice yet unimagined in this country.
Alingo, clearly the country might face some sort of a crisis. Do you agree with Javas there?
I totally agree. I think we are playing with a time bomb here. This is a political time bomb that we as Kenyans are sitting on. And it's not fair that the citizens of Kenya are being subjected to this. And this is the reason why we need to very quickly start to reflect deeply on the options that are there available for us. I think there are three options. I agree with my colleague that one, we have to look at IEBC, and IEBC ought to have come out clearly early enough to tell us, look, these are the challenges that we are facing. And these are the options that we think can help us circumvent and come out of these challenges unscathed. Now, the IEBC has waited until it is almost too late. I think we can still salvage it.
Exactly.
One, the IEBC need to provide leadership from within.
Yes.
And that leadership ought to interrogate the options of pushing the date a little bit further to getting a discussion to happen. And I propose a broad-based discussion that involves broad-based stakeholders beyond the two political protagonists that can then begin to discuss ways and means of developing a consensus which can take us to an election outside the 60 days period. The third option is, of course, what Felix has said. IEBC making a quick decision to go to the court for assistance because that is what they need now.
Yes.
If they don't get that as soon as possible, and the level and degree to which public trust and confidence is diminishing, we will have a completely chaotic situation.
And this is where I want to engage Ambassador Jack Tumwa. You've been part of the Electoral Commission. Right now, some of the commissioners are being accused of being partisan. They're supporting certain political parties. We've seen them doing their interviews live in public, televisions. So at what point do these commissioners, tend to get lured by these politicians?
First, I think I want to respond to the suggestion that IEBC be in a position to convene a meeting. Of course, Chebukati has suggested that the two heads meet for a discussion. The way I look at it is that is nothing but public relations gimmick. The president has already said that he's not willing to talk, and we need other groups, perhaps more forceful. The religious groups have been playing some part. I think they may have to come in and put pressure, because I don't see Chebukati himself, weakened as he is, coming out to control the two big heads to come up with any useful discussion. It may not work.
Yes.
The question of commissioners starting to take orders or to listen to forces other than from within, I think is something which is very unfortunate. I had suggested long before these commissioners were interviewed that we as Kenyans belong to parties, and that is open. The Constitution says these people have to be interviewed professionally, hired professionally, and given the jobs. That is what happened to the Hassan group. That is what happened to this group.
Clearly, it seems this is something that is not happening with the current IEBC. Now, unfortunately, we are out of time. Felix, Ambassador Jack, as well as Javas and Peter Lingo from Kakamega, you all have 1 minute each. Your final comment, Felix.
Let me comment on what the lamentations by Chebukati, just for 1 minute. I think Chebukati is misunderstanding and misinterpreting the Constitution and the IEBC Act insofar as his position as the chair and that of the commissioners are concerned. My brother Peter Ling was alluded to it. But this is in both the law and the precedent and the practice by past commission chairmen, Chebukati is over and above all other commissioners. He is not required on matters of presidential election to consult and to refer to collegiate decision-making. He said today that routinely his motions are being turned down. Chairman Kivuitu, even Ahmed Isaac, was over and above the other commissioners. There is nothing that stops Chebukati because as the chairman is exercising a quasi-judicial role that not the vice chair or the other commissioners have the similar powers. Chebukati can take a decision and veto the decision of all the other commissioners. And so it's misapplying the law.
That seems not to be the case now because we're seeing a chairman who seems to have his hands tied. Javas, your final comment?
Well, if we do not get to have an election within the 60-day period, we may resort to have extra constitutional means of conducting an election. That may force us to go even possibly to Parliament and see how we can have a constitutional amendment. And that is an unfortunate situation that we may find ourselves in. But to Chairman Chebukati, speaking to you tonight, it is important that you grow a backbone, show leadership, and we want to see all commissioners growing a backbone. We want to see sensibility in the commission, but much more. It is proper to inspire confidence in Kenyans and even the process itself. If you cannot inspire confidence, and if you cannot actually guarantee, as the chair to the commission, that you can oversee a credible election, then time has come for you to hang up your boots.
Exactly. Now, Peter, your final comment before we wrap up?
Chairman Chebukati has cried out very loud. He is demonstrating that the institution that he is presiding over, the IEBC, is completely punctured. He's also been weakened, and that is what he's suggesting to us. That is also corroborated by the sentiments expressed by the former commissioner, Dr. Akombe. That being the case, we have to remind Chairman Chebukati that he is the first amongst equals. And that means that he has to stand firm and take decisions. And if in his wisdom, we are not going to have a credible elections. Let him tell us now, so that as Kenyans, we make a decision now on what we think can be better for us.
Exactly.
We all love this country. We are all Kenyans, and we want the best for it.
Thank you very much.
If the best for Kenya is to postpone the elections, then so be it.
Thank you, Peter Alingo, for your input. Of course, it's going to be very interesting days coming forward. Is IEBC going to conduct the October 26th presidential rerun, or they're going to resort to some of the options you gentlemen have mentioned? Many thanks, Peter Alingo, for your input as an election expert, Ambassador Jack Tuma, former ECK Commissioner, Felix Odhiambo, who is an election expert, as well as Javas Bigambo, who is a governance expert. And before we end the show, let's take a look at the proverb of the day. And finally, on the bottom line tonight, we want to leave you with some rather reflective words by the late South African reggae maestro, that is Lucky Dube, who was killed on a day like today, 10 years ago. That was in the year 2007. And here is one of his tracks, which we found very timely at this time. I leave you with the song Together as One by the late Lucky Dube. Have a good night. Indian, we got it come.